In this episode, we move into a part of security that feels especially familiar because it involves the devices people carry, connect, and depend on almost without thinking. Phones, tablets, wireless networks, smart sensors, cameras, wearables, and other connected tools are now woven into daily life at work and at home, which means they are also woven into modern risk. For someone studying for the Certified Information Systems Auditor (CISA) exam, this topic matters because these devices extend the organization far beyond a traditional office desk or server room. They create convenience, speed, and visibility, but they also create more pathways for data to move, more places for access to be granted, and more points where security assumptions can quietly fail. Once you understand that mobile, wireless, and Internet of Things (IoT) devices are really about expanding the edge of the organization, the control questions become much easier to understand because the main issue is not the gadget itself. The main issue is whether the organization knows what is connecting, why it is connecting, what it can reach, and how that connection is being controlled over time. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful place to start is by separating these device categories while also seeing what they have in common. Mobile devices usually refer to smartphones, tablets, and portable systems that users carry with them and use in many locations. Wireless technologies are the communication methods that allow devices to connect without a physical cable, which often increases convenience and flexibility, but also changes the security boundary because the connection is no longer tied to a specific wall jack or room. IoT devices are connected objects that may not look like traditional computers at all, yet they still collect data, send signals, receive commands, and often rely on networks to function. A smart thermostat, security camera, badge reader, medical monitor, inventory sensor, or building controller can all be part of the IoT world. What these categories share is mobility, connectivity, and a tendency to blend into normal business activity so completely that people forget they are still computing devices with identities, software, settings, and vulnerabilities. That is why auditors need to treat them as part of the control environment rather than as harmless conveniences sitting on the edge of the real system. One reason this topic is so important is that these devices often sit close to real people, real spaces, and real business activity. A laptop in a data center can be controlled physically and logically in fairly predictable ways, but a phone or tablet may move through airports, homes, vehicles, hotels, public spaces, and coffee shops in a single week. A wireless access point may quietly become the door through which employees, visitors, and attackers all try to connect. An IoT sensor may live in a warehouse, clinic, or factory floor where security oversight is less consistent than in a traditional server environment. This closeness to daily work makes these devices valuable, but it also makes them harder to protect with old assumptions. People use them quickly, carry them casually, and often expect them to be simple even when they are actually powerful endpoints linked to sensitive systems. For a beginner, the key lesson is that convenience changes risk. The easier it becomes to connect and move, the more important it becomes to know what boundaries still exist and whether those boundaries are strong enough to protect the organization. Mobile devices deserve special attention because they combine communication, identity, storage, and business access in one place. A phone may hold email, messaging history, calendars, saved credentials, contact data, authentication tools, cloud application access, and copies of business files, all in a device small enough to be lost in the seat pocket of a plane or forgotten on a restaurant table. A tablet used for field work may connect to internal systems, collect customer information, or support remote approvals away from the office. These devices are often protected by screen locks and other settings, but the risk does not disappear simply because the device is small and familiar. The organization still has to decide who can use it, how it is configured, whether it stores sensitive data locally, how it is monitored, and what happens if it is lost, stolen, or repurposed. From an audit perspective, Mobile security is never just about the physical device. It is about the trust relationship that device carries into the business environment every time a user unlocks it and begins working. Wireless security matters for a different but related reason, because it changes how systems connect and how signals travel through space that the organization does not fully control. A wired connection is physically tied to a point in the building, but wireless communication extends outward and may be reachable far beyond the walls of the office or facility. That means the organization must think more carefully about who can discover the network, who can attempt to connect, what protections are required before access is granted, and how traffic is protected while moving through the air. A weak wireless environment can allow unauthorized access, interception attempts, or poorly controlled guest activity that creates unnecessary exposure. At the same time, wireless connectivity is deeply useful and often essential, so the answer is not to reject it entirely. The answer is to control it thoughtfully. A wireless local area network, WLAN, should support the business without becoming an open invitation to outsiders, and that requires strong authentication, secure configuration, segmentation, monitoring, and clear policy about how different types of users and devices are handled. IoT devices introduce an additional layer of complexity because many of them were designed first for convenience, automation, visibility, or cost efficiency rather than for strong security. A smart camera, badge reader, lighting controller, printer, industrial sensor, or connected medical device may have limited processing power, vendor-controlled software, infrequent patching, and default settings that are risky if left unchanged. Some of these devices are deployed by facilities teams, operations groups, or other business units that do not think of themselves as traditional technology departments, which can create gaps in accountability. A beginner might assume that if a device does not look like a computer, it is somehow less relevant to security, but that is exactly the kind of assumption that creates blind spots. If a device has a network identity, can send or receive data, or can influence a physical process, then it belongs in the security conversation. For auditors, IoT is especially important because the greatest risk may not be the device alone. The greater risk may be that nobody is fully responsible for how it is selected, configured, connected, reviewed, and retired. One of the strongest control ideas across all three categories is inventory. Organizations cannot secure what they do not know exists, and this becomes especially difficult when devices are portable, inexpensive, embedded in operations, or easy to deploy without central approval. A formal laptop program may be tracked carefully while dozens of sensors, tablets, smart displays, and wireless components appear in departments with very little centralized visibility. Good control begins with knowing what devices are present, where they are located, who owns them, what business function they support, what networks they use, and what sensitivity level applies to the data they handle. This sounds basic, but it is the foundation of every other control decision. If a device is not in the inventory, it may miss patching, monitoring, review, and incident response planning. From a CISA perspective, inventory is powerful because it is both an operational tool and an audit signal. When a company has poor visibility into its mobile, wireless, and IoT population, that often points to much deeper problems in governance and accountability. Another core control is secure configuration, because many problems begin not with advanced attacks, but with weak defaults, unnecessary features, and convenience-based settings that were never revisited. A phone or tablet may allow broad application permissions, easy data sharing, or unrestricted synchronization if it is not configured with business use in mind. A wireless device may broadcast unnecessary information, permit weak authentication, or remain reachable through default administrative settings. An IoT product may ship with a standard password, outdated software, or remote management enabled even when the business does not truly need it. Good practice means starting from a baseline that reflects approved use, reduced exposure, and controlled administration. This does not mean every device becomes difficult to use. It means the organization has decided what safe normal should look like before the device begins performing real work. Auditors often look for secure baseline standards, documented exceptions, and evidence that settings are reviewed over time, because a device that begins securely can still drift into risk if changes are made casually or without oversight. Access control and authentication are just as important here as they are anywhere else, but the details take on extra urgency because these devices often move through varied environments and are used by people outside traditional office settings. A lost phone with weak authentication can become a doorway into email, cloud applications, and internal systems. A wireless network with weak access control may allow a nearby attacker to test credentials or search for poorly segmented resources. An IoT device with shared administrator credentials may let unauthorized users alter settings or disrupt operations. Strong authentication, least privilege, and careful management of administrative access matter because the damage from misplaced trust can be significant even when the device seems small or specialized. This is one reason multi-factor authentication, MFA, is so valuable for remote and mobile access, and it is why organizations often use mobile device management, MDM, to help enforce policies, control settings, and support device-level governance. From the audit view, the question is never just whether a password exists. The deeper question is whether access is aligned with risk, reviewed regularly, and protected strongly enough for the device's real business role. Segmentation also becomes extremely important when dealing with wireless and IoT environments because not every device should be trusted equally or allowed to communicate freely with everything else. A guest wireless user should not necessarily sit on the same logical path as a payroll application, and a smart building sensor should not automatically have easy access to business-critical databases simply because it can connect to the network. Segmentation helps limit lateral movement, reduce attack paths, and make monitoring more meaningful because devices are grouped according to purpose and sensitivity. This matters especially with IoT because many such devices cannot defend themselves strongly, so the surrounding network must help contain their risk. A smart camera with minimal built-in security can still be part of a safer environment if it is placed in an appropriately restricted zone with tightly controlled access. Auditors care about this because segmentation is one of the clearest signs that the organization understands trust boundaries. When every connected device can reach everything else, it usually means convenience has been allowed to outweigh disciplined control design. Monitoring and visibility are also essential because these devices can be numerous, widely distributed, and easy to forget until something goes wrong. A wireless environment may show signs of repeated unauthorized connection attempts, rogue devices, or unusual traffic patterns that deserve review. Mobile devices may indicate policy violations, missing updates, failed authentication attempts, or signs that a device is no longer in a trusted state. IoT systems may communicate at odd times, generate traffic inconsistent with their purpose, or fail silently in ways that create both operational and security risk. Good visibility helps teams see these issues before they become larger incidents, but that requires the organization to define what meaningful observation looks like for each type of device. Too little logging creates blindness, while poorly tuned alerting creates noise that nobody takes seriously. For auditors, evidence of monitoring is important not just because logs exist, but because the organization can show that important events are collected, protected, reviewed, and linked to a response process that works in practice rather than only in written policy. The human factor is especially strong in this topic because mobile and wireless technology feel personal and routine in a way that can lower people's sense of caution. Employees may connect to public networks, delay updates, approve application permissions without reading them, or use personal devices for business simply because it seems faster. That is why bring your own device, BYOD, arrangements create both opportunity and complexity. Personal ownership can increase flexibility and reduce cost, but it also raises questions about privacy, monitoring, acceptable use, data separation, and what the organization can require when the device is used for work. A company must decide whether it can truly manage business risk on a device it does not fully control and whether the user understands those conditions. User awareness therefore matters just as much as technical settings. People need to know why a screen lock matters, why an unknown wireless network can be risky, why unapproved apps create exposure, and why a seemingly harmless smart device can still become part of a larger problem if it connects carelessly to business systems. Patch management and lifecycle control are also major concerns because many mobile and IoT devices change hands, age out of support, or remain in service long after their security posture has become weak. A smartphone that no longer receives updates becomes a growing liability if it still connects to business applications. A wireless component may run outdated firmware for years because it works well enough operationally, even though its security weaknesses are increasing. An IoT device may remain installed in a facility long after the vendor stops providing patches or support, which means the organization now depends on a device that cannot easily be strengthened. Good control includes knowing when devices were deployed, what software they run, whether updates are current, and when replacement or isolation is necessary. Auditors often focus on lifecycle management because this is where convenience and budget pressure can quietly create long-term risk. A device does not become safe simply because it has been present for years without incident. In many cases, age and familiarity are exactly what make weak devices harder to notice and harder to challenge. When auditors review this area, they usually look across governance, technical control, and operational practice rather than treating devices as isolated objects. They may examine inventory records, ownership assignments, wireless security settings, MDM policy enforcement, access control design, segmentation diagrams, update status, monitoring evidence, incident history, and procedures for lost or retired devices. They may also compare policy statements with actual device behavior to determine whether the environment reflects what leadership believes is in place. This is especially important in mobile, wireless, and IoT reviews because environments can become inconsistent very quickly. One department may follow strong enrollment rules, another may rely on informal workarounds, and a third may not even realize its connected devices fall under information security oversight. The audit objective is to determine whether the organization has turned convenience-driven technology into a controlled environment that supports the business safely. That means asking whether connected devices are visible, governed, protected, reviewed, and retired in a disciplined way rather than being allowed to spread faster than accountability can keep up. Mobile, wireless, and IoT devices should feel much less like a scattered collection of trendy technologies and much more like a set of connected control challenges at the edge of the modern organization. These devices expand productivity, mobility, automation, and insight, but they also expand the number of places where access can be granted, data can move, and security can fail quietly. The most important lesson for the CISA learner is that the issue is not whether a device is small, wireless, or specialized. The issue is whether it is known, configured securely, authenticated properly, segmented wisely, monitored meaningfully, and governed throughout its life cycle. When organizations treat these devices as part of the real control environment rather than as side conveniences, they are much more likely to manage the risk effectively. When they treat them casually, the same convenience that made the devices attractive can make them the easiest path to exposure, disruption, or loss of trust across the business.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.